Good morning. I'm Chris Jansing, and we have breaking news for you. A major new development from the White House. We just got this information, and it's happening just as the House committee is expected to hold a vote to hold Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt of Congress. President Obama, we have just learned, has asserted executive privilege over the documents sought by that House committee. And, of course, that could have a big effect on these contempt proceedings. Let me give you the background, just set it up for you. Congressman Issa wanted Holder to turn over more documents regarding Fast and Furious, that botched operation that was supposed to track guns smuggled into Mexico.
Position is give us the documents. Their position is they'd like to give us a briefing and then documents supporting their assertion that essentially there was no wrongdoing, and then bring it to a close.
But up until this point, the Attorney General has been insisting that he's turned over 7,600 pages of documents already and called the whole thing political gamesmanship.
I don't know. I think the ball's in their court. They rejected what I thought was an extraordinary offer on our part. They have, I guess, until they decide, they have the ability to change their minds.
And Democrats have been defending the Attorney General, saying he has been reasonable and cooperative.
I think it's unfortunate that things have gotten to this point. I really do believe that we were on the 1 foot line. We could have gotten this ball across the goal, but unfortunately that did not happen this evening.
So now the game changer happened just a couple of minutes ago. The president has decided to assert executive privilege. Pete Williams is with us now. Pete, what does this mean?
Well, it won't stop the committee from having its vote. If the committee votes to find the Attorney General in contempt, it would go to the full House. It won't stop the full House from voting. But here's where it makes a big difference. Here's the end game. If the full House votes to find the Attorney General in contempt, then there's a federal law that says the Speaker of the House sends this to the U.S. Attorney here in Washington, part of the Justice Department, and the law says that he shall convene a grand jury to look into whether to hold the Attorney General in criminal contempt. Now, in the past, the Justice Department, through Republican and Democratic administrations alike, has taken the position that when the president asserts executive privilege, then the U.S. Attorney doesn't do anything, that he does not refer this to a grand jury. And in a couple of letters that have just been released informing the House of this development, the Justice Department says that releasing these documents or forcing the government to turn them over to the House would basically chill executive branch deliberations in the future and impair the executive branch's ability to respond to congressional oversight. Now, just one other thing here, Chris. There's the Fast and Furious operation itself and how it was approved and what went wrong there. This dispute is about something a little different, something removed. It's from documents created last year when the government sent a letter to Congress, as it turns out, erroneously saying that there was no gun walking. Then the government pulled that letter back and said, wait, that's wrong. We've been misinformed by the people in Arizona. What Congress wants to know is what was going on in the Justice Department when it figured that out. To put it bluntly, they want to know if there was a cover-up. The administration has consistently said, no, there wasn't. This was an honest mistake. Those are the documents the House wants now, the stuff that was created after the officials in Washington found out the true nature, they found out the true nature of Fast and Furious. So it's not about the operation itself. It's about how the government responded to finding out about it. That's the dispute now over the documents, and the administration is saying that to turn those over would chill internal deliberation. So this is so it's only those documents, Pete? It's yes.
Only the documents that were included in this latest request from Darrell Issa.
Exactly. That's correct.
All right. Give us a little bit of perspective here. I was just, handed some research and, reminded me that Clinton invoked executive privilege during the Lewinsky probe. There have been instances of executive privilege. Off the top of your head, how rare is this?
Oh, not rare at all when you're dealing with Congress. Now, when oftentimes Congress says, we want something, and the president says, no, that's protected by executive privilege. What we're talking about, and so that's not very rare. What we're talking about is a subset of that when Congress is voting to find somebody in contempt for not turning it over, and then the number of times that the administration has asserted executive privilege is much smaller there. But it does happen, and it's happened so much that this has actually gone to court. And as I say, in both Republican and Democratic administrations, the Justice Department institutionally has taken the view that this is a separation of powers thing. And by the way, it's not something the courts are particularly thrilled about refereeing when the two branches are going at it like this. So, it just changes now the possible end game here.
All right. Well, that's obviously what we're looking at. Pete Williams, thank you so much. Let me bring in Republican Congressman Patrick Meehan and Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speier. Both are members of this committee that is going to vote later today. Congressman Meehan, let me start with you. What do you think about the president's decision to assert executive privilege in this case?
Well, one of the questions becomes the extent to which that privilege would cover these materials. I'm not sure what the answer is on that at this point in time, but it is important to point out what Pete did. There was a representation made by the Justice Department, and then they did a 180 and they changed that representation. So they made a statement that was fundamentally incorrect to Congress, and now we're trying to ask why that was made. There's evidence as well of intimidation of individuals who were whistleblowers, who were very concerned about those representations made and brought information that contradicted the Justice Department representations. So there has been whistleblower intimidation on top of it, and this is a very, very sad moment, but that's the issue that really concerns me.
Congresswoman, is he right?
I think what is important to focus on is the fact that the Attorney General has already turned over 7,000 pages of documents, about 1,300 relating to this letter to Senator Grassley of February 4th, and a willingness to turn over all the documents, but couldn't do it by the start of business today. And so for all of the apparent willingness to work together, this is becoming a showdown at the OK Corral that should never be taking place. And frankly, it's becoming a bit of a circus when we have so many issues that we should be dealing with, focused on creating more jobs, using this committee to look at the VA system that is not responding to claims by veterans swiftly enough, the Medicare fraud issues that exist in the system. There's so many other issues we could be dealing with. We're not even dealing with Fast and Furious anymore. We all agree that that was a horrendous mistake that really started in George Bush administration. And I think we're losing sight of what's really important here.
Well, she does make a point, Congressman. This did start during the Bush administration. Given everything else that is going on, why is this being pursued? You know the perception on the Democratic side, and that is that this is basically a political witch hunt.
Well, I regret that we're here, and I wish we were working on jobs. But the fact of the matter is, the process of gun walking as an investigative tool was begun under an ATF division during a Bush administration, but the U.S. attorney from that administration denied that very prosecution based on those tactics. It was this administration, with evidence that it goes to the highest levels of the criminal division in the Justice Department, that went back and opened that up and encouraged the ATF to pursue this. So there's very clear violations of what is consistent with ATF policy being actually supported from the highest levels of the Justice Department. I mean, these are very serious issues, and the bottom line is we have an agent, Brian Terry, who is dead, who was led to bleed out in a desert, and people are asking questions, his family's asking questions, and they're going unanswered.
Congressman, that's the same argument that we have heard from Darrell Issa. It is, we have an obligation to find out how Fast and Furious got so messed up and why an agent was killed. Do you feel you have sufficient information to get to the bottom of this? Is there a legitimate reason for requesting this other information?
Well, first of all, if we're going to really try to get to the bottom of Fast and Furious, it's really important to bring former Attorney General Mukasey to hear from him, because he was in charge and was actually briefed on the issue. We should have the former head of the ATF, who is Mr. Melson, who said that he never sent this information up the chain of command, so to speak. So I think if we're really focused on Brian Terry and what went wrong, we've got to make sure that we do a post-mortem of the entire system. What we aren't doing with this contempt proceeding is focus on that. We're now talking about whether or not a legislative affairs office within the Department of Justice wrote a letter with the auspices of the Attorney General, or was it just information provided by the locals in Arizona? I mean, it's like saying I put out an email, my staff puts out an email that I didn't know about, and whether or not that was indeed the case. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the fundamental issues about Fast and Furious.
I want to thank both of you for taking the time. I know you have to go into the committee hearing, and that is going to get underway any minute now. Thanks to both of you for being with us.